Single dad failed the interview and walked away. Minutes later, billionaire CEO ran after him. What could make a billionaire CEO leave everything behind and chase someone who just walked away? Why did this unexpected moment happen after a failed interview? Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day filled with happiness and positive energy. Please give me 5 seconds to share a small part of your kindness with me by subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications for more inspiring stories. Thank you for being here and supporting our journey. Tell us where you're watching this video from around the world and what time it is for you right now. Now, let us begin the story. Sometimes the biggest opportunities are lost in the moment when someone decides they already know your worth. Ethan Walker heard those words years later, but on that morning, he only felt the quiet disappointment of another closed door. The office building stood tall above the busy streets of downtown Chicago, filled with people chasing their next achievement. Ethan walked through the entrance holding a simple folder, wearing a clean but modest jacket, and carrying the hope that this interview could change his life. He was not looking for luxury. He was not searching for attention. He only wanted a stable opportunity for himself and his 7-year-old son, Noah. Inside the interview room, Ethan sat across from Richard Collins, the hiring manager responsible for choosing the next candidate. Richard glanced through Ethan's resume with a serious expression. "You have an interesting background," he said, "but there are some gaps that concern us." Ethan nodded calmly. He had expected questions about the years he spent away from the corporate world. He knew his resume did not tell the entire story. It did not explain the mornings preparing breakfast before school, the evenings helping with homework, or the difficult choices he made after becoming a single father. It only showed missing years. It did not show the reason behind them. "Understand," Ethan replied. "I know my path looks different from others." Richard leaned back and looked at the documents again. "This position requires someone who can handle pressure and make important decisions. We need someone with a stronger recent record." Ethan listened quietly. He had faced moments like this before. People often saw the space between his past and present, but they rarely asked what happened during that time. Years earlier, Ethan had been recognized for his ability to solve complex problems and lead important projects. He had built a strong reputation in his field. But when life changed, he made a choice many people would not understand. He chose to be there for his son. He chose family over recognition. He never regretted that decision. The interview continued for a few more minutes, but Ethan could feel where the conversation was going. Richard was not interested in understanding his story. He had already made his decision. Finally, Richard closed the folder. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Walker. We will continue with other candidates." Ethan smiled politely. "Thank you for your time." There was no anger in his voice. No frustration. No attempt to convince someone who had already decided. He simply stood up, picked up his folder, and walked toward the door. Outside the office, Ethan paused for a moment. He looked at the busy city around him and took a deep breath. Another rejection. Another reminder that life did not always recognize effort immediately. But Ethan had learned something important over the years. A closed door did not define his value. He thought about Noah waiting for him at home, and that thought gave him strength. Meanwhile, inside the building, something unexpected was about to happen. A document that had been overlooked was about to reveal information that would change everything. And the woman who discovered the truth was not just any executive. She was Charlotte Bennett, the billionaire CEO of the company. Ethan Walker had learned that some moments in life are not defined by what happens, but by how a person chooses to respond. As he walked away from the company building, he carried the same quiet strength that had guided him through every difficult season. He did not know that the decision made inside that interview room was based on incomplete information. He did not know that someone was about to discover the part of his story that had been hidden for years. Ethan returned home that afternoon to the small apartment where he and his son, Noah, had built a simple but meaningful life. The first thing Noah asked was, "Did the interview go well?" Ethan looked at his son and smiled. He did not want Noah to learn disappointment as something painful. He wanted him to understand that setbacks were simply moments that tested patience. "It was not the opportunity we hoped for," Ethan said, "but we will be okay." Noah nodded because he trusted his father completely. He knew Ethan always found a way forward. What nobody at the company knew was that Ethan's years away from the corporate world were not empty years. They were years filled with responsibility, growth, and quiet achievements that never appeared on a traditional resume. While others were building careers, Ethan was building a life for his son. He learned patience. He learned discipline. He learned how to solve problems under pressure without needing recognition. Those skills were invisible on paper, but they had shaped him into the person he was. Back at the company headquarters, Charlotte Bennett arrived for her afternoon meetings. As the Billionaire CEO, she was known for making careful decisions and surrounding herself with talented people. She believed success came from recognizing potential, not simply choosing people who looked impressive. When she entered her office, her assistant placed several documents on her desk. One file immediately caught her attention. This candidate was interviewed today, the assistant explained. The hiring team decided not to move forward. Charlotte opened the file casually, expecting to review another ordinary applicant. But within moments, her expression changed. The information in front of her did not match the decision that had been made. She saw previous projects, leadership records, and recommendations from respected professionals. She saw evidence of a person who had once played a major role in solving problems that affected the company's success years earlier. Who reviewed this interview? Charlotte asked. Her assistant mentioned Richard Collins. Charlotte looked again at Ethan's profile. She noticed something even more important than his professional achievements. The timeline showed that Ethan had stepped away from his career during a period when many people would have chosen personal success instead. He had chosen to focus on his family. To Charlotte, that decision did not represent a lack of ambition. It represented character. She remembered a lesson her own father taught her when she was young. The most valuable people are not always the ones who know how to win. They're the ones who know what is worth protecting. Suddenly, Charlotte understood what had happened. The company had not rejected an unqualified candidate. They had overlooked someone whose value was hidden behind a different life path. She immediately stood up from her desk. Ethan had already left the building, but Charlotte knew she could not ignore this mistake. For the first time that day, the Billionaire CEO was not thinking about numbers, meetings, or contracts. She was thinking about one man who had walked away quietly, never knowing that someone had finally seen the truth. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen after someone has already walked away. Ethan Walker believed the interview was finished, the opportunity was gone, and life would simply continue as it always had. He had no idea that across the city, a decision was being questioned by the one person whose opinion could change everything. Charlotte Bennett sat in her office reviewing Ethan's information again. She carefully studied the details that others had ignored. She noticed the years he spent away from the corporate world, but she also noticed the reason behind them. She saw a man who had stepped back from a successful career to become the father his son needed. To Charlotte, that was not a weakness. It was proof of responsibility and commitment. She looked at the notes from the interview and noticed something unusual. Richard's comments focused mostly on what Ethan did not have. He mentioned the gap in his career. He mentioned his unconventional path. But he did not mention the qualities that made Ethan different. He did not mention his problem-solving ability, his leadership experience, or the trust people had placed in him years earlier. Charlotte leaned back in her chair and quietly said, "How do we miss this?" Her assistant explained that Richard had followed the standard hiring process. But Charlotte knew something important. A process could be correct on paper and still fail to recognize the right person. Meanwhile, Ethan continued his evening like any other. He helped Noah with homework, prepared dinner, and listened to his son talk about a school project. To the outside world, it looked like a simple routine. But to Ethan, these moments were everything. He had learned that success was not always found in offices, titles, or public recognition. Sometimes success was found in being there when someone needed you most. After dinner, Ethan received a call from an unfamiliar number. He almost ignored it, thinking it was another notification or a sales call. But something made him answer. "Hello, this is Charlotte Bennett," the voice said. Ethan paused. He recognized the name immediately. "The CEO?" he asked. Charlotte smiled slightly. "Yes, I would like to speak with you about today's interview." Ethan remained quiet for a moment. He did not know what to expect. "I appreciate your time," he replied carefully, "but I understand the decision has already been made." Charlotte looked through the office window at the city lights. "Actually, I believe we made the wrong decision." Those words surprised Ethan. He had heard many polite responses after rejection, but this felt different. Charlotte was not calling to offer sympathy. She was calling because she wanted to correct a mistake. She explained that she had reviewed his background and discovered the impact he had made before stepping away from the industry. She told him she respected the choice he made to prioritize his family. Ethan listened quietly. He appreciated her words, but he did not want special treatment. "I do not want a position because of my past," Ethan said. "I want an opportunity because I can contribute." Charlotte smiled because that was exactly the answer she hoped to hear. It confirmed what she already believed. Ethan Walker was not looking for someone to recognize his old achievements. He was looking for a chance to create something meaningful in the present. And for the first time in a long time, someone saw him not as a missing piece in a resume, but as the complete person behind the story. There are moments in life when a person discovers that being overlooked was never a reflection of their true value. It was only a sign that others had not taken the time to look deeper. For Ethan Walker, that moment came when Charlotte Bennett decided to see beyond the first impression. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Bennett Technologies for a second meeting. This time, he did not walk through the doors hoping to prove himself. He walked in knowing he had been given a chance to have an honest conversation. Charlotte welcomed him personally. She did not sit across from him as a billionaire CEO evaluating an applicant. She sat across from him as someone who respected his journey. "I want to understand your story," Charlotte said, "not just what is written on a piece of paper." Ethan appreciated that question because it was something he rarely heard. Most people asked about what he had achieved before. Few people asked why he made the choices he made. Ethan explained that after his son Noah was born, his priorities changed. He had been offered opportunities that could have pushed his career forward, but they required sacrifices he was not ready to make. At that time, he believed being present for his child mattered more than another promotion or another title. Charlotte listened carefully. She understood because she had also made difficult choices in her own life. She knew success was not always about reaching the highest position. Sometimes success was about having the courage to protect what mattered most. As their conversation continued, Ethan shared ideas about the company's challenges. He did not try to impress Charlotte with complicated language or exaggerated confidence. He simply explained solutions the way he would explain them to a person sitting across from him. Charlotte immediately noticed something unique. Ethan had the ability to make complicated problems feel simple. He understood that businesses were not only built on strategies and numbers. They were built by people. "This is what we have been missing," Charlotte quietly said. Ethan looked surprised. He was not expecting praise. He was simply answering honestly. Charlotte explained that the company had many talented employees, but few people who could combine experience with empathy. She believed Ethan's greatest strength was not only what he knew, it was how he thought. Meanwhile, Richard Collins heard about the second meeting and became curious. He reviewed Ethan's background again and began noticing details he had ignored during the first interview. He realized he had focused on the gaps instead of the person behind them. He had judged a story without knowing the reason behind it. Later that afternoon, Charlotte introduced Ethan to a few members of her leadership team. Some were surprised because they had never heard his name before. But within minutes of speaking with him, they understood why Charlotte wanted him involved. Ethan did not enter the room trying to become the most important person there. He entered the room ready to contribute. That was what made people listen. At the end of the day, Ethan returned home to Noah and told him about the new opportunity. His son smiled and asked, "Does this mean things are changing?" Ethan thought for a moment before answering, "Maybe, but the most important things will stay the same." Noah knew exactly what his father meant. The world around Ethan might change, but the person he was would not. And that was the reason Charlotte Bennett knew she had found someone rare. The greatest changes in life often begin with a simple decision to see someone differently. For Ethan Walker, the second chance he received was not just about a job opportunity. It was about being recognized for the person he had always been. But inside Bennett Technologies, not everyone understood that yet. The following week, Ethan officially began working with Charlotte Bennett's team. He arrived early every morning, just as he always had, carrying the same simple coffee cup and the same calm attitude. He did not walk through the office expecting special treatment because of Charlotte's support. He wanted to earn the respect of the people around him through his actions. Some employees welcomed him immediately, while others quietly wondered why the CEO had personally brought him into the company. They only knew that a candidate who had failed an interview was suddenly given an important opportunity. They did not know the full story. Richard Collins was one of the people who struggled with the situation. He had spent years building his reputation as someone who could identify strong candidates. Accepting that he had overlooked Ethan was difficult. But every day, he saw more evidence that Charlotte had made the right decision. Ethan was not trying to prove Richard wrong. He was simply focused on helping the company move forward. During his first major project meeting, the team faced a challenge that had delayed progress for several months. Different departments had different opinions, and everyone had a different idea about the best solution. Ethan listened carefully before speaking. He asked questions. He considered each person's perspective. Then he suggested a simple approach that connected everyone's ideas together. The room became quiet as the team realized the solution had been there all along. Charlotte watched from the side and smiled. She understood that Ethan's strength was not only his knowledge. It was his ability to bring people together. Later that day, Charlotte thanked him for his contribution. "You know, many people would have walked into this room trying to prove they were the smartest person here," she said. "But you came in trying to understand everyone." Ethan smiled. "I learned a long time ago that listening can solve problems that intelligence alone cannot." Those words stayed with Charlotte. Throughout her career, she had met many successful people who wanted recognition. But Ethan was different. He carried confidence without needing attention. He had experience without arrogance. He had ambition without losing compassion. Meanwhile, Richard began reflecting on the interview that started everything. He remembered how quickly he had judged Ethan. He remembered seeing a gap in a resume instead of a story of responsibility. For the first time, Richard realized that experience was not always measured by recent achievements. Sometimes it was measured by the challenges a person overcame when nobody was watching. That evening, Ethan returned home and found Noah waiting at the door with excitement about his father's new work. Ethan picked him up and smiled. His life was changing, but the foundation remained the same. He was still a father first. He was still the man who valued kindness over recognition. And without realizing it, Ethan was teaching everyone around him the same lesson. True worth is not always visible at first glance. Sometimes, the people who are quietly overlooked are the ones who have the most to offer. There are moments when a person's true character is revealed not during success, but during the quiet challenges that follow. For Ethan Walker, the new position at Bennett Technologies was not simply a fresh start. It was a chance to show that his values, experience, and dedication still mattered in a world that often judged people too quickly. As the weeks passed, Ethan became an important part of the team. He continued arriving early, staying focused, and treating everyone with the same respect, regardless of their position. He greeted employees by name, listened to their ideas, and never acted as if he deserved special attention. Charlotte Bennett noticed this every day. She had hired many talented professionals throughout her career, but Ethan brought something different. He understood that a company was not only built by strategies and technology. It was built by people who trusted one another. One afternoon, Charlotte invited Ethan to join a private leadership discussion about an upcoming company decision. Several executives were surprised because Ethan was still new to the organization. They wondered why the CEO trusted someone who had only recently joined the team. Ethan noticed their hesitation, but he did not take it personally. He understood that respect was something earned over time. During the meeting, the executives discussed a difficult situation involving a major project. The company had invested significant resources, but the results were not meeting expectations. Some leaders suggested making quick changes, while others wanted to continue with the original plan. Ethan listened quietly as everyone shared their opinions. Then Charlotte asked, "What would you do?" Ethan paused before answering. I think we should first understand why the team is struggling, he said. Sometimes the problem is not the people. Sometimes the problem is that people are working without the right support. The room became silent. Ethan explained that before making major decisions, leaders needed to understand the challenges faced by the people doing the work every day. His approach was simple, but it showed years of experience. Charlotte looked around the room and saw something she had hoped for. She saw people beginning to think differently. After the meeting, one executive approached Ethan and admitted that his perspective changed the way he viewed the problem. Ethan thanked him and said, "Everyone has something valuable to contribute when they feel heard." Those words reflected the way Ethan lived his life. He knew what it felt like to be overlooked. He knew what it felt like when people saw only a small part of his story. That was why he always tried to see more in others. Later that evening, Charlotte and Ethan had a conversation in her office. She told him that many people in powerful positions forgot the importance of humility. Ethan smiled and replied, "Life has a way of reminding us that everyone is carrying something we cannot see." Charlotte remembered those words because they described exactly why she respected him. Ethan was not successful because of a title or a position. He was successful because he remained kind when nobody was rewarding him for it. Meanwhile, Richard Collins continued watching Ethan's progress from a distance. The man he once dismissed was now earning the trust of people throughout the company. Richard finally understood the mistake he had made. He had looked at Ethan's circumstances and assumed he knew the whole story. But he never considered the strength it took to build a life with patience, responsibility, and dignity. And slowly, the people around Ethan began learning the same lesson. Sometimes the person who walks away from rejection is the person everyone will eventually wish they had recognized sooner. The quietest people often carry the strongest stories, and sometimes the world only understands their value after seeing the impact they leave behind. Ethan Walker never entered Bennett Technologies hoping to prove anyone wrong. He simply wanted to do meaningful work while continuing to be the father his son needed. But as time passed, more people began noticing the qualities that made him different. He did not seek attention, yet people naturally listened when he spoke. He did not demand respect, yet respect followed him. One morning, Charlotte Bennett invited Ethan to join an important company presentation with several senior leaders. It was an opportunity many employees would have considered a major career moment. But Ethan treated it like any other responsibility. He reviewed the information carefully, prepared his ideas, and focused on helping the team succeed. During the presentation, one executive questioned Ethan's recommendations. "You have only been here a short time," the executive said. "How can you be certain this approach will work?" Ethan did not become defensive. He simply answered, "I am not certain because nobody can predict every outcome. But I believe the best decisions come from understanding the people and the situation completely." Charlotte watched as the conversation continued. She noticed something important. Ethan was not trying to win an argument. He was trying to find the best solution. That difference changed the way people viewed him. After the meeting, several team members approached Ethan to ask for his thoughts on their own projects. They were no longer seeing him as the candidate who had once been overlooked. They were seeing him as a valuable member of the company. Even Richard Collins noticed the change. He had spent weeks watching Ethan succeed, and each day made him reflect more on the interview that started everything. One afternoon, Richard finally asked Ethan if they could talk. Ethan agreed. Richard looked uncomfortable, but sincere. "I owe you an apology," Richard said. "During your interview, I focused on what I thought was missing. I did not take the time to understand your story." Ethan listened quietly. He did not need an apology to feel successful. He had already moved forward. But he appreciated Richard's honesty. "Everyone makes mistakes," Ethan replied. "The important thing is what we learn afterward." Richard nodded because he understood that Ethan was offering something rare. He was offering forgiveness without making the other person feel small. Later that day, Charlotte learned about the conversation. She smiled because it confirmed what she already knew about Ethan. His greatest strength was not only his professional ability. It was the way he treated people who had once misunderstood him. That evening, Ethan returned home and spent time with Noah. His son noticed that his father seemed happy. "Do you like a new job?" Noah asked. Ethan smiled and answered, "I like the people I get to work with. That matters a lot." Noah smiled because he understood something simple. His father had never been chasing a title. He had always been searching for a place where kindness and hard work were valued. Across the company, Ethan's story continued to spread. Employees began sharing how he helped others, how he listened, and how he made people feel respected. The man who once walked away quietly from a failed interview had become someone people wanted to follow. And the most powerful lesson was not that Ethan finally received recognition. It was that he never changed while waiting for it. True recognition does not come from a single moment of success. It comes from the quiet choices a person makes every day when nobody is watching. For Ethan Walker, the greatest change was not the position he received or the respect he earned. It was knowing that he could remain true to himself while building a new future. As months passed at Bennett Technologies, Ethan became more than just a talented employee. He became someone people trusted. Employees from different departments started coming to him for advice because they knew he would always listen before giving an answer. He never acted like he had all the solutions. Instead, he helped others discover their own. Charlotte Bennett noticed how naturally Ethan influenced the people around him. She had spent years studying leadership, but Ethan reminded her of something many executives forgot. Leadership was not about standing above others. It was about helping others rise. One afternoon, Charlotte invited Ethan to a private conversation about the future of the company. She explained that Bennett Technologies was entering a new stage of growth and wanted leaders who could protect the company culture while expanding its success. "I have met many people who know how to build businesses," Charlotte said, "but fewer people know how to build trust." Ethan smiled and looked thoughtful. "Trust takes time," he replied. "People do not believe what we say. They believe what we consistently show them." Charlotte knew those words came from experience, not from a business book. Ethan had spent years proving his character through actions. He had shown patience when life was difficult. He had shown responsibility when nobody was giving him recognition. He had shown kindness even when people misunderstood him. Meanwhile, Richard Collins continued changing as well. The experience with Ethan forced him to reconsider how he judged others. He began taking more time during interviews and asking better questions. Instead of looking only for perfect resumes, he started looking for complete stories. One day, Richard admitted to Charlotte that meeting Ethan had changed the way he approached his work. "I thought I was searching for the right candidate," Richard said, "but I realized I was searching for a certain image of success. Ethan taught me that success can look different than we expect." Charlotte appreciated his honesty. Growth was not only about recognizing talent. It was also about having the courage to admit when we were wrong. At home, Ethan continued living the same way he always had. He still prepared breakfast for Noah every morning. He still helped with homework. He still made time for the small moments that mattered most. His new career brought new opportunities, but he never allowed success to take away the things that made him who he was. One evening, Noah asked his father why so many people at his company seemed to respect him. Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "Maybe because I learned that every person deserves respect before they earn anything else." Noah smiled because he knew that was exactly who his father had always been. The world had finally noticed Ethan Walker, but Ethan had never needed the world to tell him his value. He had known it all along. And now, everyone around him was learning the same lesson. The people who quietly carry responsibility, kindness, and dignity are often the ones who create the biggest changes. Years later, when people looked back at the changes that happened at Bennett Technologies, many remembered the projects, the growth, and the success that followed. But Charlotte Bennett remembered something much more important. She remembered the day a quiet man walked away from an opportunity because he refused to lose his dignity. Ethan Walker never expected that a single interview would become a turning point in his life. He never expected a billionaire CEO to recognize what others had overlooked. But the greatest part of his journey was not the position he earned or the respect he received. It was the reminder that a person's value exists long before the world notices it. Ethan continued leading with the same principles that guided him from the beginning. He cared about people. He listened before speaking. He believed that every person carried a story that deserved to be understood. Under his influence, Bennett Technologies became more than a successful company. It became a place where employees felt appreciated and respected. Charlotte often said that Ethan changed the way the company viewed leadership. He showed everyone that strength did not always come from being the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes strength came from patience, compassion, and the courage to remain kind during difficult moments. Richard Collins also carried the lesson with him. The experience changed the way he approached every decision. He no longer judged people by appearances or assumptions. He learned to ask better questions and search for the truth behind every story. One afternoon, Richard and Ethan shared a conversation about how much had changed since that first interview. Richard smiled and said, "I thought I was deciding whether you were right for the company. I did not realize I was the one who needed to learn something." Ethan laughed softly. "Life has a way of teaching all of us," he replied. Their conversation showed how far everyone had come. A moment that began with misunderstanding had become a moment of growth and redemption. At home, Ethan's life remained centered around the person who had always mattered most. Noah was growing older, becoming more independent, and beginning to understand the journey his father had taken. One evening, Noah asked, "Dad, were you ever worried when things did not work out?" Ethan smiled and looked at his son. "Of course I was. But I learned that one closed door does not mean the journey is over." Noah remembered those words because they represented everything his father had taught him. Years earlier, Ethan had walked away from a place that did not recognize him. He did not walk away because he lacked confidence. He walked away because he respected himself enough to wait for the right opportunity. And eventually, the right opportunity found him. The story of Ethan Walker became a reminder to everyone who heard it. People are often judged by a single moment, a single mistake, or a single page of their story. But nobody can understand a person by looking at only one chapter. True worth is discovered through patience, character, and the choices made when nobody is watching. Ethan never needed the world to chase after him to prove he mattered. His actions had already shown the truth. The man who quietly walked away was always valuable. The world simply needed time to see it.